Hello, my name is Leviathe, also known as Leanne. Today I wanted to start exploring what sympathetic resonance is. I recently got chosen to be an artist in this festival here in San Francisco called SOMArts, and I wanted to explore music in a way that I haven't thought about music before. I wanted to delve into more of functionality and the science behind music instead of the perspective of music and how we pretty much put our own personal masks upon music, because I think it's super interesting to think of music in a way that no matter what anyone thinks, it affects us in a certain way. Because if you go to the physics of it, it actually affects us in terms of the vibrations in physical manners. So this is definitely going to be a series on exploring what that means, and I do not at all know all about the physics of it, but I hope in this series that is what I'm gonna do. So, sympathetic resonance. Let's talk about resonance first. What the Wikipedia says resonance is a phenomenon in which a vibrating system or external force drives another system to oscillate with greater amplitude at a specific frequency, so that the response amplitude is at a relative maximum. And that could be interpreted into the place where something vibrates the most at a certain frequency. And that could be seen in real life, like if you're ever at a show, if you're jamming with your friends, if you hear a bass guitar and it's emitting all these frequencies, and then you hear the snare go off, that is what you can think about what resonance is, because at the specific tone that you're playing on the bass, it is putting out a force that affects the tuning of that snare. So that's why you hear it vibrate. So that is also sympathetic resonance, is that something sympathetically is triggered by a different force. Another way to think about it is, if you ever played with filters or anything, you can see, if you take a low pass, I'm going to choose a different color, a low pass, and if you cut it off, at 1,000 hertz, you only hear whatever is below 1,000 hertz. With whatever instrument you're using. But if you want to, at that specific 1,000 hertz, want to make it more resonant and more upfront in comparison to all this lower stuff, most filters will have resonant peaks where you can just bump it up. So that is what the resonance is. Also, let's talk about wavelengths. So wavelength, a hertz. 1 hertz equals to 1 oscillation per second. And what that means is that the wavelength goes up, down, meets at the node, goes down, and does 1 cycle. That is 1 oscillation. So, in how we tune things, the standard of tuning is usually to A, which is 440 hertz. Here, some other instruments are 442, or different styles of music is tuned to different hertz of A, if there is even an A in that culture's music, whatever. But A here is 440 hertz, which means that whatever you're playing or how the sound is being emitted is rotating or is cycling 440 times per second. And that's interesting because we get to think about it in terms of what does it mean to have overtones and harmonics to 440. You are emitting a sound that is 440, yet other things are vibrating that aren't tuned to 440, which is what sympathetic resonance is. So this is where we get to fundamentals. So if you have a 440A, something that is tuned to 220 hertz is 220 oscillations per second, you'll also hear that. But before we get there, what you can hear it as is a really, really common experiment that is done when teaching physics, as I've researched, is if you take two 440 tuning forks, duplicate, and there's a resonance chamber. Whoa, that's kind of weird. Anyways, you put them next to each other. You hit this one, and it's going off. And it's connected to this wooden box that's open on both ends, and because the tuning fork is touching the wood, it is vibrating the air inside. That's how we hear things, is how air is dispersed, or a gas is dispersed through a space. So this is emitting 440, and it's going out. And if you stop this in the middle of it vibrating, you'll be able to hear the sympathetic resonance of this 440, because this is triggering this, because they're tuned exactly the same. And that's only, they're the same things. But if this tuning fork was tuned to any of the harmonic series of that certain tuning fork, you will also hear it go off. And this is mostly seen in aliquot stringing, which is what Steinway made really popular, the piano maker. They were able to use sympathetic resonance to their advantage to make piano sound way more fuller, in which they would take, we have all these strings that we hit with a hammer, and once it hits it, it emits whatever note it is, like C. And underneath the strings that we hit, there's all these other strings that are tuned in the overtones and harmonics series of that certain string. So they'll go off even though you're not hitting them, so it sounds much richer than just a string by itself. Like a harpsichord, which is plucked, but it's definitely more sparse than a grand piano. More on that later. How do you find the harmonics of a certain note? There is an equation that you can use, which is Fn N1. So Fn is the fundamental that you want to find, and the fundamental is a certain building, like the base of what harmonic you can use to of that harmonic series of the note. I didn't explain that well, but Fn equals N of F1. So F1 is the first fundamental times whatever fundamental you're trying to find equals that hertz. So if we have 440 hertz, we know that the first fundamental would be 110 hertz. So if F1 is 110 hertz, and we're trying to find F2, then N equals whatever fundamental you're trying to find. So F2 equals F2, so the second harmonic. Yeah, this is the first harmonic, which is the fundamental, first fundamental. Second harmonic, second fundamental, you get it? So 2F1, which is times 110. So F2 equals 210. So that's the second harmonic. You can keep going. F3 equals 330 hertz, etc., until 440, above. So if you had multiple things tuned in these fundamental, you would be able to hear them. And I think that is absolutely fascinating, because that gives insight into how our bodies are affected, how our ears are affected, how physical properties are affected through distance and amplitude and mass. And it brings another realm to music. Anyways, next episode, I'm going to talk about more of how tuning works with different, get more into the physical properties of things and amplitude, like wind instruments, and how length, tension, and mass are all contributors in how a thing vibrates. Until next time.